There's an old man walking through a small town in Georgia, and nobody in that town knows his real name. He tells people he is there on business. He carries no suitcase that anyone can find. He drinks his coffee slowly. He asks more questions than he answers. And within a few weeks, he will begin quietly buying 92 pencil drawings off the wall of a coffee shop, one at a time, and giving them away for free to strangers he has never met. He is not doing this for attention. He is doing everything in his power to make sure nobody finds out who is really behind it. By the end of this story, you will learn that this man is not a retired teacher, not a lonely widower killing time, and not even close to who the town thinks he is. He is one of the most famous and reclusive artists of the last 100 years, hiding in plain sight in a town he has never visited before, for a reason that will not be revealed until the very last pages. A reason that ties directly back to a woman he loved decades earlier, a son he has never met, and a grief so enormous it nearly buried him alive. This is the story of Theo of Golden by Allen Levi, and by the time we're done, you'll understand why readers all over the world are calling it one of the most quietly devastating novels they've read in years. Stay with me, because the ending of this book will completely recontextualize everything that comes before it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I'm Margot, and every week I break down powerful, moving books, the ones that stay with you long after you close the last page, so you can decide if they're worth your time or just sit back and experience the whole story right here. Today, we're diving into Theo of Golden, the debut novel from Allen Levi, a man who, in real life, is a small-town attorney, a former judge, and a working singer-songwriter, which honestly tells you a lot about the kind of soul who could write a book this tender. This novel came out quietly, without a massive marketing push, and it built its entire audience through word of mouth. Readers telling other readers, you have to read this. That almost never happens anymore. And once you hear the story, you'll understand why people can't stop talking about it. Before we go further, if you enjoy deep emotional book breakdowns like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because I put out new summaries every single week. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming after this one. Now, let's step into the town of Golden. The story opens in early spring, just before Easter, in a small southern city, simply called Golden. It's the kind of town where everybody eventually knows everybody. A downtown promenade, family-owned shops, a slower rhythm of life that most of us have honestly forgotten exists. And into this town walks a stranger. His name is Theo. He's an elderly man, Portuguese by birth, somewhere in his 80s, with a gentle accent and an unmistakable fondness for rivers. He's drawn to water the way some people are drawn to mountains or forests. Nobody in Golden has ever seen him before. Nobody knows where he came from. And when people ask why he's in town, his answer is always the same: short and simple. He's there on business. That's it. No elaboration. On his very first morning in Golden, Theo wanders into a coffee shop called The Chalice. And this is where the entire story quietly locks into motion. Hanging on the walls of that coffee shop are 92 pencil portraits, real, detailed drawings of actual residents of the town, all created by a local artist named Asher Glisson. Theo stands in front of those portraits for a long time, and in that moment, he makes a decision that will define the rest of the book. He decides he is going to buy every single one of those 92 portraits, one at a time, and personally return each drawing to the person it depicts, because in his mind, the person in the portrait, not the artist, not the coffee shop, is the rightful owner of that piece of art. Now, if you're thinking, okay, that's a strange, oddly specific mission for a random old man to give himself, you're right. And that strangeness is exactly what pulls you through this book, because Theo isn't wealthy in an obvious, flashy way. He isn't advertising himself. He moves through Golden almost like a ghost with impeccable manners, and yet very quickly we learn he has serious money behind him. Through a sardonic, sharp-tongued bookstore owner named Tony Wilcox, Theo learns about an available apartment above a building called Ponder House, owned by a buttoned-up local consultant named James Ponder. Theo rents the apartment, and then, almost casually, he deposits $100,000 $5,000 with Mr. Ponder to quietly fund his mission, the portrait purchases, and whatever acts of generosity might follow. This is where the book announces its real intention. This isn't a mystery about solving a crime. This is a mystery about solving loneliness. And Theo, this unassuming stranger, is about to spend an entire year proving that the smallest, most specific act of attention, really seeing someone, can crack open a person's whole life. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting, because each portrait Theo buys isn't just a transaction, it's a door into somebody's private pain. And some of these stories are going to hit you hard. Before we get into them, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, drop a comment telling me which book you want summarized next. I read every single one, and a lot of my videos come directly from your requests. All right, let's get back into Golden. Theo's first bestowal, that's the word he uses for these gifts, goes to a young woman named Minette Prentice, an accountant who is quietly miserable in a career she never really wanted. When Theo hands her the portrait of herself, something unexpected comes out in the conversation. Minette is actually the niece of Asher Glisson, the very artist who drew all 92 portraits in the first place. The town, it turns out, is far more woven together than Theo, or we, initially realized. From there, Theo's circle begins to widen, and this is really the emotional engine of the whole book. He meets Kendrick Whitaker, a night custodian carrying a grief that never properly healed. His wife was killed in a car accident that also badly injured their daughter, Lamisha. When Theo learns Lamisha is back in the hospital, he doesn't announce a grand gesture. He doesn't hold a press conference about his generosity. He simply, quietly, arranges for her medical care to be covered and makes sure Kendrick's grandmother is financially supported too. No fanfare. No thanks expected. That's the pattern with Theo throughout this entire novel. He gives in a way that almost refuses to be seen giving. He also becomes close with Simone Lavoie, a graduate student devoted to the cello, and with Basil Cannonfield, a street musician who plays for coins and passersby. But one of the most powerful relationships in the entire book, and I want you to really sit with this one, is the one Theo builds with a woman named Ellen. Ellen is unhoused. She lives with a mental illness that the town has largely written her off for. The kind of woman most people cross the street to avoid. Theo doesn't avoid her. He seeks her out, gives her the portrait drawn of her, and slowly she begins to trust him enough to share something she has clearly never told many people. 30 years earlier, authorities took her infant daughter away from her, a little girl named Willa Francesca, because the state decided Ellen was mentally unfit to raise her. 30 years of carrying that loss, alone, on the streets of a town that mostly looked past her. Ellen ends up taking Theo on a bicycle tour of Golden, this strange, tender image of an old Portuguese stranger and an unhoused woman pedaling through town together, seeing it through her eyes instead of anyone else's. And when Christmas comes, Theo doesn't send Ellen money or charity in the traditional sense. He sends her artistic tools and materials because he's noticed something in her that nobody else bothered to notice, a real creative spark. And that gift eventually grows into a small business of her own. He doesn't fix her life for her. He gives her back the tools to build it herself. That distinction matters, and it's honestly one of the most quietly powerful ideas in the whole novel. And I have to say, this is the part of the book where you start to realize Theo isn't just a kind old man with money to spare. He's carrying something heavy of his own, something he hasn't told anyone in Golden, something that, once you learn it, will completely change how you see every single one of his bestowals. If you've made it this far, you clearly love a slow burn emotional story. So make sure you're subscribed, because I've got a whole library of these waiting for you. Now, let's get into the truth behind Theo. Theo eventually visits Asher Glisson's art studio directly, the artist behind all 92 portraits, and the two men form a real, deep friendship. During that visit, Theo notices a particular painting, a single lone tree standing in an open field. Asher explains that it was his late mother's favorite image, though she never once told him why it mattered so much to her. Theo says very little in that moment, but if you're paying close attention, this is one of the first quiet threads the author is planting, a thread that won't fully pull tight until the final chapters. It's around this point in the book that Theo opens up to Kendrick about his own past. And this is where Theo of Golden stops being simply a story about generosity and becomes a story about grief, real, unresolved, life-altering grief. Decades earlier, Theo's 10-year-old daughter Tita was killed in a car accident in France, the same accident that took his wife's life as well. He describes in devastating detail how he essentially drowned in that grief for years afterward, unable to function, unable to see any reason to keep living in any meaningful way. And then, one evening, sitting beside the River Marne, watching the sunset, something shifted in him. Not a full healing, nothing that clean or that fast, but the first flicker of light after years of total darkness. That's the moment you finally understand who Theo really is underneath the mystery. He's not a wealthy eccentric with a quirky hobby. He is a man who lost everything that mattered to him, who nearly disappeared into that loss completely, and who has spent the years since trying to hand other people the same flicker of light he once found for himself, one portrait, one quiet act of generosity at a time. Every bestowal in this book is, in a very real sense, Theo trying to save the version of himself he once was. As autumn arrives in Golden, Theo becomes even more woven into the fabric of the town. He celebrates Tony's birthday, and Tony, the sharp-tongued bookstore owner who seemed so guarded early in the story, finally opens up about the trauma he carried out of the Vietnam War. Trauma he's clearly never fully processed either. At Thanksgiving, Theo is welcomed into the Glisson family's home for dinner, sitting among people who, by this point, have folded him completely into their lives without ever really knowing who he is. And throughout that dinner, Theo can't stop quietly studying the old paintings and photographs of Asher's mother, a woman the family calls Gammy. He lingers on her image a little too long. He asks a few too many gentle questions about her. And if you've been paying attention to those earlier hints about the lone tree painting, you might already be starting to feel where this is heading. Okay, this is the part of the video where I need you to really lean in, because everything is about to change in the space of just a few pages. What happens next is the reason this book has made grown adults sit on their couch and cry into a cup of coffee. If you want to see how this story pays off every single thread we've talked about so far, stay with me. Do not skip ahead. In December, Theo travels back to New York. We learn this almost in passing. Another small detail that hints he has a much bigger life outside of Golden than anyone realizes. But even from a distance, he doesn't forget the people he's spent the year building relationships with. He sends personalized Christmas gifts to his friends across town, each one specific to who they are, each one clearly chosen with real thought. Then, in January, he returns to Golden for one specific reason: to attend Simone's graduate cello recital, the culmination of months of her hard work that he's quietly supported and celebrated all along. That night, close to 2 a.m, Ellen is sitting alone by the town fountain, the same fountain that's appeared throughout the story as a kind of gathering point for Golden's people, when 3 drunken men attack her. Ellen, who has survived far more than most people ever will, fights back with everything she has. Simone happens to walk by at that exact moment, sees what's happening, and steps in to help her. And the attackers turn on him too, beating him savagely. And here is the moment the entire book has been building toward, in every quiet, patient, unhurried page before it. Theo is watching this unfold from his 3rd-floor balcony at Ponder House. He sees the people he has spent a year loving being brutalized in front of him. And in the desperate urgency of that moment, leaning over the balcony railing to see, help, to do something, he loses his balance. He falls to the sidewalk below. And Theo, this man who spent an entire year quietly giving everything he had to strangers who never even knew his real name, dies. I want to sit with that for a second, because it is genuinely one of the most gutting turns I've read in modern fiction. There's no villain to blame here. No dramatic confrontation. Just an old man trying to protect people he loved, losing his footing at the worst possible second. Allen Levi doesn't give you a clean, easy ending. He gives you something that feels devastatingly, achingly real. In the aftermath, as the police begin investigating exactly who this mysterious stranger actually was, the truth finally surfaces. Theo's full name is Gamas Theophilus Zilavez, known around the entire art world as Zilla, one of the most celebrated and reclusive Portuguese-American artists of the 20th century, a man whose work hangs hangs in major museums across the globe. A newspaper obituary lays it all out for the town and for us. His decades-long career, his complete withdrawal from public life after his wife and daughter were killed in 1987, and the mystery of why, of all places, he chose to spend his final year living quietly, anonymously, in a small town in Georgia called Golden. But that's not even the final revelation. The very last piece of the puzzle belongs to Asher Glisson, the artist whose 92 portraits started this entire story. Asher learns that decades earlier, his mother, the woman the family lovingly called Gammy, had fallen in love with a young Theo while the two of them were studying art together in Madrid. When she suddenly returned home to Golden, she was already pregnant and she was carrying Asher. She quickly married a longtime sweetheart from home, built her life around that marriage, and wrote to Theo just once to tell him the truth, that the child was his. And then she begged him, for reasons the book allows to remain painfully human and complicated, to never contact her again. Theo honored that request for an entire lifetime. And then, near the very end of his own life, he finally came to Golden, not for 92 strangers, though he loved them all in the process, but to quietly, secretly be near the son he had never once been allowed to meet. Every portrait, every bestowal, every quiet act of generosity toward a town full of strangers. It was all, in some way, Theo circling closer and closer to the one person he came there to find, without ever having the courage, or perhaps the right, in his own mind, to simply say who he was. In the wake of Theo's death, the people of Golden don't just mourn him, they carry him forward. Asher takes over the management of Theo's estate and continues the work his father quietly started, the ongoing mission of seeing people and honoring them through art. And throughout the final pages, Asher reflects on a connection to Theo that ran far deeper than either of them ever got the chance to fully live out loud. At its heart, Theo of Golden isn't really a mystery novel, even though it's dressed up as one. It's a book about what it actually means to be seen, fully, specifically without judgment, maybe for the first time in your life. It's about the idea that grief doesn't have to end in bitterness. It can, slowly and painfully, be transformed into generosity. And it's about how the smallest act, buying back a drawing, sending someone art supplies, simply asking a genuine question, and then actually listening to the answer, can quietly rebuild a person from the inside out. Allen Levi wrote this story as a debut novelist, after decades of practicing law and writing music. And you can feel that unhurried, patient wisdom on every page. The sense that this was written by someone who has watched people, really watched them, for a very long time. That's probably why readers describe finishing this book in tears, and why word of mouth alone turned it into one of the most talked about literary novels of the past couple of years. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me while researching it, that alone should tell you it's worth your time. So that's Theo of Golden by Allen Levi, a story about a stranger who gave everything he had to a town that never knew his real name, in search of a son who never knew he existed. If you loved this breakdown, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need a story like this one. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I release a new deep dive summary every single week, and drop a comment below telling me what's the one book that completely wrecked you emotionally. I want to know, and it might just become next week's video. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.